Good morning.
Good morning.
Catherine, thank you for coming up.
Thank you.
Where have you come from?
Come all the way up from the bottom of the country, down in Surrey. So, yeah.
Yeah, when I spoke to you on LinkedIn, you are our furthest guest.
Yes.
I don't think we can go further than that.
I don't know if there's an award for that, but I'll have that.
I can't believe how far you've come. I was saying to Lee, I was like, you won't believe it. It's coming up on a train, it's getting in a hotel. I was like, what? It's coming all the way here for our podcast.
From the big city, yeah.
And it's really I really appreciate you coming on, because I was looking at what you do and it's all linked to education, and we'll get into all that. But before we start with anything, let's do an introduction. Who you are, what you do,
yeah,
and how you found yourself working within education.
Yeah, sure. So I spent, for my sins, as I suppose lots of people have, 15 years in corporate. And I always thought my goal was to just climb the ladder. I guess that's kind of how you come out of school, isn't it? You always think, I've got to get to the top. That's going to be the next best thing to do. And I remember I was a board director by the time I was 31. And I remember looking around the room thinking, I actually want to be in this room with these people. I just thought they're not my people, right?
Yeah.
I was definitely the token female, and I'm definitely not waving the gender card, but I was. And I thought, actually, how can I use this though? So I set off and did sort of digital transformation and that kind of stuff. And I found myself working with really creative people in an agency. And I ended up kind of moving into that space and worked in partnerships there and founded and exited. And that afforded me the opportunity to go and really do something that I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
And now I work as a higher education consultant. So I work with universities and charities and all sorts of different businesses in and around education. And usually I go in and sort of solve big problems, but the problems I like to solve are the ones with the students at the heart of them.
Yeah, nice. So you were going back to school days then, did you go on to university?
Yeah, I did.
You did? What did you study?
I didn't want to go.
You didn't? Oh, so yeah, it's like just the natural path of this is the route I need to go down. I need to pick something, and you kind of fell into that world.
Yeah, you know what? I think my parents didn't ever get to go. It was a generation before, I think, where some people went and some people didn't.
Yeah.
And I remember they always thought that it would be a good route to take. And so they were never pushy, but it ended up being the route that I took. But yeah, I went to Cardiff Uni and I studied comms, English and linguistics. And it was, but I'd taken a gap year. I said, okay, I'll go to uni, but I'm going to take a gap year. And so I went off and I travelled around the world. And I remember picking my course whilst I was away. I didn't have a mobile phone with me because we just didn't really have phones back then. And I remember it was like an Argos catalogue style, massive like paper manual that you had to search through. And I just went, I'll do that one because it felt like something I could do. But yeah, that was my journey into uni.
Yeah, I'm always intrigued by that. Because I didn't do university. I left school and started work immediately. And I always kind of spoke to people that went to uni and those didn't. But I just think like with university, there was almost a course for anything. It's like anything you want to do, we'll create a course for it. But it almost pushed people down a route of, well, it buys me time before I have to go do work. Did you ever see Van Wilder, the film? And I just thought everyone that doesn't want to go to work follows a Van Wilder route.
It's got to be like that.
Just get to party and kind of hang around, get into loads of debt, do all that. And then end of it, I'm like, I best go get a job.
Better go and get one.
But yeah, it was interesting. I didn't understand it. But yeah, it was just interesting to hear your story. And so after university, what was your first job? What was your first job?
So I went into PR, which was so weird because it wasn't what I'd studied and it wasn't the route that I thought I was going to go down, but I knew I needed a job. And I knew that I had to do something that had some sort of transferable skills in it. So I went into PR because I thought, I can talk, I can write, and I can socialise at events. I'll do that. And it was never my end goal. But it was just something that I thought, I can get some money to pay back my student debt and I can get my foot in the door. And I think there's not many people I speak to who the first job that they did, or even maybe the fourth job that they did, was a job that they either thought they were going to do or wanted to do. But it gave me an opportunity to like learn something and then learn what I did like and what I didn't like. Yeah. And that kind of helped me then move on to the things that I did after. Yeah.
PR, straight into PR is interesting. I guess the thing is, so going back, you actually thought you might have a a long career in PR then, did you?
No,
you didn't. It was just to fill a void.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah, it was just to fill a void because I think the thing is it was very hard to find a job, right?
Yeah.
There wasn't, there was no LinkedIn, there were no websites to do it. You were just like through someone's friend and mate and who you found out about something. So I just took that role and I knew that whatever I learned there, I could just pick up some skills. And I went on to be a digital project manager after that for like Jaguar. It was completely random, but I knew I'd pick something up there and it was worth starting.
Yeah, I love it. That was... I do a lot of talks to schools as a STEM ambassador, and they talk about my career, and we talk about college, talk at university, and I have to tell them I left school and went to McDonald's.
Yeah.
That was my first job, and yet here today, run a couple of businesses, run a podcast, everything's kind of made without the traditional route of education, which is a bit of an interesting play because I'm supposed to be there saying, let's do education, let's go on. But actually, the space is for those that are not led by education. The space is for those that do have a bit of an entrepreneurial mindset. And it's important we teach that into schools as well and not we force everybody down the route. So you went on to work and then after that, did a bit, bounce about. Obviously, you've spoke about it, but then you brought yourself back into the world of education again, working with university schools. So talk to us a little bit about the work that you do then now.
Yeah, so I mean, I've always had a lens. It was really interesting you're saying about, what route do you get into things? I guess two things that really underpin me are I don't like injustice and I always want things to be better. And so I found myself I backed myself and I'd helped sell, a business with somebody else. So that kind of got my entrepreneurial spirit going. And I remember thinking, actually, I can do this. So who do I want to work with? I have a choice. I don't have to do what it is that someone expects me to do. And I remember thinking back, there's always been a theme in my life where I've always been like, oh, but I don't like it that they always think all teenagers are like this or all young people are like that and these people are disruptive or these people are lazy. I had always found it very irritating, even when I was that age, and I've continued to feel that way. And I remember thinking that I was chatting to someone and they said, why are young people not working this out for themselves? They just have to get on with it. And I was thinking, yeah, but they can't. And they don't want to, so why don't we help them? So my work in that space is all about trying to change the dynamic of the relationship with young people. They're starting in education in a really difficult place. Some of them might be international students. They're not only new to university, but they're new to the UK. But even if they're UK students, we're putting them in quite a different set of circumstances with a different subject, different teachers, different environment, often living with people that they've never met before. And we need to do more to help them. So I do go into universities and I often go in with a target operating model type pitch or something like that, that very corporate stance of something that they want you to go in and solve. But I always end up working with the students because it's the bit I care about. And I think if we can solve something for the students, that's when everything else is going to start going really well. Yeah.
Talking about that gap, because everything you do, I can relate back to me really well. I remember leaving school, 15, walking out with my GCSEs, no idea what I wanted to do, no help, no support. I had my mum and dad to lean on, but they were doing their own thing, working. Yeah. And you're on your own. Mm-hmm. The school were almost like, there you go, off you go.
For sure.
And then I didn't have the qualifications to get into college. So then I'm just in this like middle ground of what do you do? And I'd, maybe a bit about me where I went out and I searched for jobs and I got into jobs, but there's so many people that are kind of just stuck in that zone. Yeah. You obviously work with universities. Yeah. Do you go back a level then to around that 15, 16 age? Because that is a real, what you could call dead zone of, people just float off into whatever they want to do. Do you do any work around that age?
Not currently, but it's becoming more apparent, and exactly in the same way that you've just said, that there's that transitional block of time, that exiting school. And you may have exited school because you finished your exams. You may also have just missed out from finishing your exams and just exited school. And I do really think that there's something quite powerful and important that we need to explore in that space. So at the moment, I'm looking at that window from having sort of finished your college studies, but there's absolutely no doubt there's going to be quite a lot of importance to go back again.
Yeah, it's a business idea there for you. go back in. Oh, hang on a minute. There's all the 15-year-olds. There's
a window.
Back into the schools and going, because we did. I know we mentioned this before. We had a CEO on who talked about that education and following their path long after school to understand what they do. And some of the stories of the people that left school with nothing, but today sat within, a very entrepreneurial people. It's what was that journey and what did we do here that allowed them to do that there? And we don't capture that data. No. We almost have the block 15 and on you go. And we did ask a couple of people about, do you have to track their journey into college? And they don't. They don't have the resources to. Yeah. Not unless the teacher's bringing them up and saying, how are you getting on? Which isn't happening. But there's nothing to track that progress. But so you're then working with them around the college time, university, to get them onto that next phase. We'll talk about mental health then, because obviously it's a big thing at the moment, is mental health, and it seems to be more relevant than ever. And it's one of, you hear flippant comments sometimes like, oh, everyone seems to have a mental health problem of some sort. But I don't think that's the problem. I think we've always had it. It's just that we've never had the data to be able to back it up. And now in today's world, we have a lot more available resources to know who's struggling, who's not struggling, etc. So talk to us about that piece. And, it's not everyone's about just pushing them into work, is it? There's other factors to think about. Is that right? Yeah,
I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, a lot of people do comment on that sort of sweeping statement of everybody's got a mental health problem now. I think it's just that we've become more comfortable to talk about mental health. And actually, we all have health within our mind. So, of course, we're going to have challenges that are going on. We've got a load more things that are in the young person's space now as well that are going to contribute to mental health. And I think a lot of it comes from that internal voice. So because we've got phones and everyone's absorbed in there, you're almost in a little zone there where you're feeding yourself information, which is often done just with you and just with your phone, and that just sparks your own thoughts. And I think for a lot of young people, not having the natural capacity to go out and then talk about that, either because they don't feel comfortable to do so, or they don't know who to talk to, or in so talking to somebody else, they don't know what's going to even happen with that information afterwards, that it can be internalised. And I think the impact of that, certainly I see in the higher education space, is okay, they might fall out of higher education. And systemically, that might mean that they don't finish a degree, which may or may not matter. But where do they go and who looks after them after that? It does matter. And I'm really interested in, we don't have, going back to your point about transitioning through education, we don't have any information that gets passed from colleges into universities to say, this person has this going on in their world right now, and you might want to be a bit sensitive about that and support that as they come in. There's no information at all apart from their grades that is passed across, and there's got to be a really massive impact on how they're going to settle into that university space if they don't have that information to hand. Yeah,
that's a really, really good point. And that's how we grade everything. It grades. It's almost like, and we do it with school. What's your thoughts on that? We don't have to get controversial, so that's not what the podcast about, but we may as well talk about school system. It gets a lot of hate, it gets a lot of good, but it serves a purpose. But we have this system where everything's either a pass or a fail. Yeah. And there's no middle ground for those that are kind of doing great things, but it's not picked up. They may fail on geography, history, all the things, and then they go out with nothing, because that knock-on effect must be massive for them going, I've failed school, when actually they haven't. No. But the system of how we grade, it's the same in school, it's the same in college, and then it's the same in university. Yeah. Have you done any work on the grading system and how we can actually help people along the journey that's not just a grade?
Yeah. I'm going to talk about a project that I did once at an apprenticeship company, and it is related to what you're saying here, but I think it articulates this point really well. There was a group of people that were working to try and support young people into an apprenticeship. They were taking phone calls of people that were saying, I'd like to be involved, but they weren't getting enough people through that funnel and actually onto the course. And I thought about sort of the time of day that they were calling and the audience age group that they were calling. So all these people on the phone were 18 to 24, and they were calling 18 to 24-year-olds. And they were saying, well, no one's ever picking up. I was thinking, well, what 9 o'clock call is going to get picked up by an 18-year-old? Nobody. So we were looking at the whole system of how are we going to get these really interested people onto these courses and support these young people through work. And what we realised was some people were thriving better with auditory information. Some people were thriving better with written information. So I would walk the kinesthetic people around the block at lunchtime, and we would talk about how they were doing and how they were getting people onto courses. And I would record a little podcast or a little audio thing for them every week for the ones that I knew were auditory learners and so on. And we changed the number of people that went on that thing from 32% to 76% in 3 months, just because we went in to learn about the individuals and the learning style that they had and how they would achieve. And by doing that, the impact of it was massive. So to relate it back to education, I find the grading system very oppressive. It's really staggered and structured, and it's a really open way to show your peers if you're doing a good job or not by the system. It's a judgmental thing that we add in to relationships amongst young people that allows them to say somebody's better or worse than me. And there's enough of those measures that go on already amongst, just growing up as a kid.
Yeah.
Adding into the mix how well I've done compared to my friend is hard. And I think there's a lot we can learn about just, generally how do we absorb information, and generally how do we share back that we understand that information.
Yeah. It's really tricky to try and even fix it though, isn't it? Because there's so many pupils, there's only so many people that can do anything about it. But that day, the GCSEs day, it can make and break a lot of people mentally, by not getting that grade that they thought they were going to get. Yeah. It puts them back, it can put them back years in terms of how, what they thought they were going to do, plans that they had. And yet at 15 years old, you're told, no, that can't happen. Yeah. And it does need a change. And I think most education leaders who we speak to would agree. We would like to change it. Yeah. The big X against your mark.
Gosh, and the red pen.
The red pen, yeah. I've seen loads of things about this. It's like, put the red X on. And it classes as failure. But it took me 20 odd years after school to realise that there isn't such thing as failure. Yeah. Actually, what there is there's learning and then applying what you can do and moving forward. Yeah. And this last kind of 8 years, I've kind of created my own school, really, learning about business, learning about, the mind. And it's just, we put so much pressure on them at such a young age to make things right. Yeah. And if I wasn't as resilient as I was, I could have gone, I failed that. Well, I'll just go and do whatever I possibly can. Yeah. So there's lots of work to do on that. So in terms of your work then, what does it look like? So you'll go into university. Is it quite lectury, or do you do it? Have you got slideshows? Talk us through. If you're brought into university for the day, what does it look like?
So I have two totally different lenses on how I work people usually, but there are no PowerPoints here, which is lucky. Right. Yeah. I think the thing is, you a bit like we've talked about, you've got to jump through some hurdles, right? So it tends to be that to get in through the front door, you have to do the statistics, the things you've achieved somewhere else before. And people are big fans of how many years experience you've got. And I often think, well, some of the best things I've ever done, the first time I did them was the only time I've ever done them. And so that's where I really think we can hamstring people in terms of success. You don't have to show you've done something for 20 years for you to be really good at it. But often I come into universities and the challenges will be somewhere around the student's experience. But often what they want you to do is do what somebody else has just done, but a little bit better than last time. But I don't do things the same way as everybody else. I'm a little bit disruptive like that, but in a good way. So last year I was at a London-based university and I was improving the student experience. And I said, right, guys, I'm going to stay on campus for a few weeks. And they said, you know what that involves, don't you? I thought there's no way I'm going to be able to blend in as a student. Sadly, I'm some period of time older than them now. But I knew that by being in their world and listening to them, it would be the best place that I could learn. So I threw on workshops and I stayed on campus and we did late night walks around just to see what the nightlife was like. And I spent a lot of time just immersing myself in their space to really genuinely understand what was going on for them. As a result of that, the connections I actually built with that group of students, which was about 100 plus, some of them have come on my student retreats, some of them are on my mentoring programs, some of them are actually working with me right now on an event. So I think that the relationships there were genuine and long lasting. But But there were 3 students that disappeared during that time that I was working with them for the 6 weeks that I couldn't get hold of. And I had noticed that they'd been somewhat absent during that period of time. And I just couldn't get hold of them. I'd text them, or I'd contacted the uni, or I'd contacted their tutor, or whatever it was, and I couldn't find them. Anyway, some 6 to 8 weeks later, they all got back in touch, and they'd all had a bit of a breakdown. And they said that had you not bothered to continue to keep getting in touch with me, I was planning on taking my own life. And that really made me sit back and think, my goodness, one, what an incredibly difficult and dark place it must have been for them. But 2, how important it is that we must continue to keep pushing forward in conversations with young people so that they know that they matter and that somebody is interested in them.
Yeah, there's a powerful story in it. It really is powerful. I mean, imagine you wasn't there. Thing is, that happens all the time. There isn't enough of you, is there? There isn't enough of you doing the thing. And the schools are not resourced to be able to give that type of... So sometimes it is just having somebody there. You don't know how powerful that is. So what's the stats? I know we mentioned before we came in, you were talking about stats, people starting university, dropping out, people not even going, people signing up. Yeah, touch me on this, signing up and not even turning up.
And they're not going.
I can't believe that.
I know. You've spent all this time bothering to go through your college and applying
so
and all the rest of it.
It all links in, obviously, that story. People start and then they end up going into a bit of a bad place. They don't want to do it. They feel locked, don't know where to go. And then they go down that route. You've got people who, we'll talk about this now, that sign up and actually decide within the period of signing up to go and decide, no, it's not for me.
Yeah, it's actually a staggering percentage. I think it's not obviously the same with every university, but universally it's up to 30% of people who sign up say, not for me.
Yeah.
And then that really massive drop-off is around week 5. So you've not actually finished the end of your first term and you're thinking, definitely not for me. So there's a huge problem there in how we're communicating and settling in young people, because the settling in process, that whole, not a huge fan of the phrase onboarding, but that process of welcoming, and you're about to move out of your home, move away from your friends, move away from your parents, start studying a subject you probably have never studied before, living with people that you don't know, and then you've got to be the best version of yourself to receive this information.
It's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, do you know, it's loads of stuff going on there. And then, by the way, in the end, we'll test you a lot before Christmas, and happy Christmas.
That's our system.
Yeah.
That's not great, is it?
It's awful.
When you put it like that is an awful system.
Yes, yeah.
And that is taking into account, no side effects of that. Imagine the anxiety, imagine the stress, imagine all that comes with it.
Yeah.
Yet we go, crack on.
Yeah.
And if you fail, you fail.
Yeah.
Wow. So your work's really important in that further education. It's making a lot more sense now. That piece that you do is actually quite incredible. I mean, do you have, it's really hard to probably get data, isn't it, at this point of your journey of you intercepting and coming in and working with a university and understanding how much difference you've made? Or do you have them numbers at the moment?
I mean, we have some figures in some projects, right? But a lot of the time, universities will want to know exactly what you're going to achieve from them before you start.
Yeah.
And often you say, well, I can't tell you that. I can give you a rough guide of what we're aiming for. But there's not one project that I've run where something really amazing hasn't happened as a result of it in the end. And even, some of them we've had, they care quite a lot about league tables, which is a general national measure of success, but sadly not directly related to the student specifically. But, we've seen some where they were 90 something in the league table and we got them up to 4th in 2 years.
Yeah.
So really impactful work is happening against measures that they care about. Within the space of mental health and the happiness of students, I can really only quote what I've seen in the projects that I've worked on. But knowing that there are people's lives that have been saved and knowing that there are relationships now where I've seen people go on to continue to study or continue to thrive, or in the last month or 2, I've been mentoring a group of young people who, some of them couldn't get a job for 9 months to 2 years. They've been looking for a role. And then I worked with them and they all got roles within about 2 months.
Yeah.
So systemically, I want to make a big impact across this education system, but knowing that as a starter for 10, that there's been some really good ripples to start off with, I'm proud of that.
Yeah, we can go on to this, quite a nice piece to go on to. It's talking about the not getting into work scenario, and we have this strange system where qualifications are almost, they're not getting you through the door like they used to. Back in the day, it was almost a qualification. Companies would look at it and they'd bring you in. They're now taking life experience. People are getting jobs in front of these people that have just spent 8 years studying. We've got a major issue in construction, where we've got people studying for 7 years in some aspects to study, whether it's architecture or something, and they can't get a placement because the construction companies are under pressure. They haven't got the resources to take these people on. So we're almost kind of pushing them out, but then it's like, now what? And we have this gap, and you end up, because you might be able to explain this a little more, someone that's gone to university, spent 4 years learning a degree of a high quality, and then they end up working as a barista in a coffee shop for the next 4 years. There's nothing wrong with that, but they get stuck at that point. Where does your work stop them? Because obviously you do the part in the middle, but when you then move to that next phase, you kind of, it almost, I think you mentioned this in the case, almost like we all need support in our journey. I need support now, now. I've got support, whether it's through coaching or mentorship.
Same,
So I have support, but we still expect these people to just go on off their, on their own journey. So you do your piece, you make a better culture within the university, but then they go off again.
Yes.
What's that next piece? And are you doing any work after that then?
Yes, you're absolutely right. There's so many transitional points actually that happen when you're in that young space that actually just need a lot more hand holding, aren't there? And you're absolutely right. Same as you. I have a mentor, I have a coach, I have partnerships in my network where there are people that I can ask things to. But I had to kind of find all of this stuff out for myself. And I'm 40, so, that's going to be a lot easier for me. I work continuously into that early careers space. So I spend quite a lot of time talking to, I realise that there's two kind of things going on, right? So I work quite closely with somebody who's working in the SME and entrepreneur startup space, matching young talent to those kind of companies. And I also work in that bigger, well-known corporate space of knowing all those companies too. But that's all about connecting the actual person to a job. But what's happening is people aren't getting those jobs largely because they're feeling anxious, depressed, lonely, confused, overwhelmed, etc., etc. That's why they're not getting the job, is because they can't actually get themselves up to go and do this every day. I was talking to my mentoring, so I mentor groups of people every month, and the largest theme that comes across is routine. I don't have a purpose. Okay, my purpose is to get a job, but I cannot physically sit at a desk for 8 hours a day searching endlessly for a job. It's soul destroying. And you're just putting your name into a very, very big hat, and everybody else is doing the same thing. So yes, I do continue to do that, either through mentoring, or I do early career retreats where I take people away and I connect them to entrepreneurs, to people who help them build networks, to somebody who might be able to give them a voice if they've lost their own, and to give them a taste of something that they wouldn't normally experience. But I feel really strongly that we've got to do a lot more in that transitional space, because there's not really a home. If you leave university and you don't have a job, I don't mean you're homeless. I just mean, how do you identify yourself?
Yeah. Where do you spend? We are going to a really weird time, with technology and AI, and it's never been so important to, like this whole entrepreneurial thing. Back in the day when we had coal mines and factories running, it was almost like the workforce came out of school and they went into the system, the industrial era where it was all like there was jobs everywhere. You'd get a job no matter where it was. But in today's world, you almost have to be you've got to be a creative thinker to actually get that forward momentum. Otherwise you end up just kind of floating. And you're right, I spoke to a student the other way, there was 94 applications for this one job, and I just turned around and I'm like, you're almost wasting your time. You're almost wasting time. You've got to, but not everyone's built like that.
No.
Are they?
No.
They've worked so hard to get the qualification, but then they're unseen. In the world of social media now, attention, it's like 2 seconds to grab somebody's attention. If you don't get it, you kind of, you're down the road. And there's so much work on, you know, how do you force someone to go, get yourself on social media, become a bit more present, build a personal brand. We're almost forcing these people to start, not everyone wants to build a personal brand.
I feel so strongly about this. I actually hate social media personally. I know that I have to use it for work.
Have to use it, yeah.
I have to use it. And I only really use LinkedIn because it's the only way I can manage to move myself into a space where I can link it in my personal mind to work. But you know, and the thing that's quite interesting is most of the people who are going to hire you don't want I'm going to use the phrase wacky, don't want the wacky influencer-y type behaviours, depending on the industry you're going into. So what is the middle ground? If you're not going to do the really quick, short reels and you'll be spending lots of time creating content, which in and of itself is a completely full-time job, maybe the people that you're creating that content for are never going to appeal to that content anyway. So what is the middle ground? What do you do? Do we have to go back to guerrilla marketing where people are parading different sort of, you know, banners around the streets and all kind of stuff? It's really hard to stand out. And actually, where do you learn those skills? And I think you've got to have the ability to back yourself. But a lot of young people don't feel like they're resilient or strong or have self-belief. So that's tricky for a start. You've got to know how to stand out. Maybe you're not an extrovert. Maybe you're not somebody who wants to be on camera or writing about themselves, but would be great in a job if they were in the role, you know? And a lot of the things, I mean, I am on paper an extrovert, but what that really means is I take my energy from other people. But if I'm not with other people and I'm sitting on my own at home in my bedroom writing my CV every 5 minutes, I'm not going to be doing the best job. So I feel really strongly that it's such a difficult space for these young people to be in. Yeah,
definitely. And we come from a generation where there was always jobs. There was always, you know, and now today you speak to anyone online and it's like a lot of people, the only way they know to get noticed is put yourself out there. But that doesn't work for the person that doesn't want to put themselves out there. So they're not in a place to educate these people. And it's a really, really weird zone. You know, I follow a lot of social media influencers and they're all about putting yourself out there, doing more of this, doing more of that. And at the beginning, I was all for it. I was like, yeah, let's jump on this bandwagon, you know, because I'm comfortable with that. This is great. Everyone come on this amazing journey. And then you look back and you go into a school or a college and you're like, this isn't the reality, is it? No. And there was a great podcast on the Diary of CEO the other week with Gary Stevenson and Daniel Priestley. And it was, you know, really back and forth. Daniel Priestley's like, you know, be more entrepreneurial, and Gary Stevenson's like, this isn't, you know, not everyone's in that mindset. But there was the play, you know, there was the stat to talk about, you know, the Magnificent Seven now. Back in the day, it was energy companies. It was all these. Now it's digital companies. The Magnificent Seven are made up of Apple, Microsoft. So where are we going and what are all these students going to do? Because if they're not in a digital era or in a digital headspace, they almost just get thrown down to the curb and go pick up whatever jobs are left. And he had a lot of good points to Daniel Priestley, but it's a real concern. This is why your work's so important, because teachers and, you know, lecturers can only give them a guide, but having like someone like you in that space to give them a bit of real life experience is just crazy difficult.
There's so many different lenses, aren't there, to a person? And I think you go through the education system and you're always learning a subject, and that subject is not you. You are learning a subject about something else. What you need to be learning about is yourself. And the best subject you can learn about is yourself. And who can help you do that? Well, you might find a mentor and you might be brave enough to ask them. But the more you can learn about yourself, the more you'll learn about what you are offering the world and what you can contribute and why people want to spend time with you. And people want to hire people who they spend time with. And I think the other thing that's quite important is learning that perfect is not really a thing. And social media is very challenging against that idea. But you know, my first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth job was not really my thing, but it was something that I knew that I was learning something from. So an element of flexibility, I think, in our thought process as well, about it not being perfect, but it being good enough just to start.
Yeah.
And whether that's because you want to be an entrepreneur or whether it's because you want to be a scientist or whatever it is, there's going to be something that you'll learn along that journey. So starting something is better than starting nothing.
Yeah, I really agree on that. That was my journey. I was always, if you look at my CV, 2 years, 1 year, 7 months, 1 year, 4 months, 1 year. And then at one point, I hit a point in my journey and the guy who was like, the recruiter guy was like, your CV looks bad. But I'm like, yeah, but I've learned something at every point that has allowed me to get to this position today. And eventually I kind of ignored what the CV was. And but we're drilled into that. Like, make sure you're with one business for 10 years and you might get a next job. But it's wrong. It's wrong because you're not learning about yourself. Actually, by moving job, I'm a massive advocate for that, by the way. Anyone, if you want to leave your job, go find a new job.
I did that too, yeah.
Because the next job puts you in uncomfortable positions to get you out your comfort zone, to learn something new about you. And, I remember stepping up from just being like a counter guy on a trade counter at a construction place to taking an assistant manager's role. That was not, all my peers are like, what are you doing? You're not qualified to do this. I'm not going to do it anyway.
Yes.
And then I was managing people. And before you know it, you're stepping up. So the best thing I ever felt was just starting. McDonald's, I talk about it in every podcast, I think. If you watch these, you'll notice I've noticed McDonald's, but it was the catalyst to everything else that allows me to do what I do today.
Yeah.
Without McDonald's, I don't, I know I put a lot of emphasis on that, but it's true. It got me to speak to people, serve over the counter, deal with complaints, money. I wouldn't have got that going to and doing, learning about a subject. I was learning about me. So that's a really strong piece you said there. I've never thought of it like that.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting that there's an inherent rebelliousness, though, in the people perceive the I'm going to do it anyway approach.
Yeah.
It's in you and it's in me.
Yeah.
But they perceive it as a bit rebellious. I'm going to buck the system. Yeah, because the system is one straight line and there's billions of people and they aren't going to follow the same straight line. So it absolutely involves the whole ecosystem of the economy involves people bucking the system, because otherwise it wouldn't work.
Yes.
So we have to have people who are prepared to challenge it and prepared to do something different. But that doesn't always have to mean it's completely risky. Doing something different we're sort of programmed, I think, to think that if we do something that isn't what's expected, then it must be risky or it must be inappropriate or it's not going to work out. All you're doing is starting something. You're starting something, you're trying, and you're putting yourself out there. My CV is very like yours. And I remember looking back, somebody saying, well, it's only 18 months there. And I thought, well, I'm bored after 18 months.
Yeah.
That's why I consult now. I am no use to you as an employee after the 18-month time. I am bored because I want to go in and I want to quickly achieve. And that's a good quality. So, that should be an employability quality, not
It should be. Yeah. I do say I was the worst employee. We have loads of terrible employees, but we need them people. Yeah. And it's just really interesting. I feel like I'm getting a coaching lesson from you, actually. It's quite nice because I'm starting something that's it's already kind of been done, but doing it in a different way and trying to bring people together and doing something against the grain. It doesn't mean what I'm doing is wrong. It's just challenging the norm. Yeah. But I feel comfortable just to push against the noise to see actually what this can be. Yeah. So your work then, really, to kind of like sum it up, it's that middle piece, isn't it? To not just about be subject, it's learning about them, the retreats away, giving them life experience and not just work experience. So how much what does your kind of work look like at the moment then? How many colleges, you have to name the colleges, but how many colleges and places are you working with?
Yeah, so there's lots of things going on at once. And I think, talking about the variety, I need to work in variety because it's the sort of thing that keeps me energized. So I work with big corporate partnerships, so probably about 6 or 7 different universities across the UK. I'm in deep projects with at any one time. And then I'll work with people like graduate startup companies. I'm doing something with them at the moment. I'm creating an AI tool with a friend at the moment who is deeply in the mental health space for young boys and for young people in general, in that age group, actually before the age group that I work with. So we're creating a tool that's going to hopefully help support young people's mental health as well through those transitional points. And then obviously I do the retreats as well. So there's always a blend of something going on. But my big passion piece at the moment is this massive walk that we're kicking off just to try and raise awareness for student mental health specifically. And I thought it would be quite small, but it's gone a little bit big.
Yeah, what just like a net walk?
Well, effectively, I thought, do you know what? I want to make a big impact and I want to make a big noise about student mental health and the challenges of that student experience and that student journey. We've talked about, the transitions and the settling in and all that kind of stuff. And it's, on paper, it is a really fertile topic right now to be talking about. So I want to walk between campuses to show the sort of the similarity of the journey and the importance of the connection. I mean, I'm not going to walk across the whole country, right? There's a lot of universities out there. That's for another day.
Walk to each university.
Yeah, but we're going to pass the baton between. So we're starting with 7 or 8 universities. We've found some routes we're going to walk. We're bringing big corporates along with us, which will give the young people a chance to network and connect as well. We'll bring professors, we'll bring psychologists, we'll bring everybody along to walk with students so that they might feel comfortable that in sharing their story, they've got a chance to meet someone who's been through it before, who's had the similar challenges. Life is definitely hard, and because it's not mapped out and everybody's route is different, you often can feel a lot more settled if you chat to people who are going to give you a bit of colour to that. If you don't get exposure to that, you're not going to have the chance. So this walk is really just demonstrating on a big scale that we want to shine a light on student mental health, but also do something that's going to give people a chance to talk to people and potentially lighten the load. And
what's the big mission? It's probably a wrong question to ask you because the mission will change all the time. With the kind of the mind you have, it'll always be like different things. But is there a big mission that you want to try and achieve?
Gosh, that's such a question, isn't it? Yeah, I'll probably be going, well, this year my mission.
Yeah, I was going to say, we know how this works, but yeah.
Generally, I mean, I'd love to create, my legacy lasting impact really is to try and do something in the space of disrupting the education system so that we are learning subjects, but that we're also learning about ourselves. So moulding something that is going to make people not work ready, but just life ready in general. And to do that will involve multiple different facets. But for me, I would love to have an agency in the end that is powered purely by graduates. Yeah. So people who have come out, I don't want them to work with me for any longer than a year to 18 months. That's going to be where they learn in the ripe, ready stages. And then they've got something on their CV and they can go out and do something different.
Like an extra support system that sits alongside the education sector. Katherine, I love it. Listen, we could speak all day, to be fair, but we're going to, I think our episodes sit around 55 minutes, so I think, we're about there. But thank you so much for coming on.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.